Ever since the referendum in 2016, the Brexiteers have been talking about many things, but predominantly they like to talk about one thing about Brexit until you disprove their fact about that thing, and then suddenly Brexit becomes about something else. And one of the big things that, again, Brexit was claimed to be about was trade. Trade was the word of the day back in 2016 during the referendum, and since then it has played various parts. But as fanciful as it is to describe all these fantastic trade deals, they never actually discuss the details. And indeed, we are now seeing time and time again when Liz Truss has been flying around the world doing these incredibly fast trade deals, which when we have analysed them and looked at how they are going to affect the UK, they are going to destroy our manufacturing base or really hurt like UK agriculture or other producers based in the UK for essentially, with the Australia deal, a increase to GDP of 0.2%. So, once again, how does this benefit us when it's going to be such a minuscule increase in trade? Because as we've said from the very beginning, it doesn't matter that we go and get these other trade deals from around the world, because they are never going to make up for the loss in trade we experience from not being in the EU. And that is a lot of money. And as we've said before, just because you get trade deals with Australia, India, Mexico, whatever country you name them, does not necessarily mean that there is going to be a benefit or all of a sudden producers in the UK are suddenly going to start exporting to those countries. But of course, the Brexiteers do not understand trade. And of course, we're talking about, once again, the Brexiteer who is unfortunately in charge of our trade, Liz Truss, who once again does not understand trade or how it works, because it looks like the Australian trade deal is going through a bit of a murmur in cabinet. So before we jump into that, please do remember to hit that like, share and subscribe button. And of course, down below there is a link to my Patreon page, as well as a one-off donation link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can, buy me a coffee. And thank you to all those people who do support me that way. So today's article comes from the Financial Times. And the title is UK Government Split Over the Australian Trade Deal. The British government is locked in a furious internal battle over whether to sign off a trade deal with Australia after a spat between the Department of Agriculture and the Department of International Trade over items of the terms of the agreement. And as we've said before, the two big ideas in the Tory party are Global Britain, which this is definitely part of this, getting these trade deals, and of course levelling up. And here's the thing, what we've said time and time again, neither one can succeed without undermining the other. And again, a lot of people were promised a lot by Johnson's, levelling up campaign. And again, they're not going to get it. So, two people with knowledge of the internal discussions said that ministers were divided over whether to grant tariff-free access to Australian farmers, which would risk a backlash from the UK farming industry and potentially spark a domestic political fallout. Clinching a deal with Australia, the first big post-Brexit deal, is not a rollover of existing agreements that the UK enjoyed as an EU member. This would be a symbolic moment for Brexiteers arguing for the benefits of free trade. The government announced in April that there was, quote, a spirit to finalise the deal by June ahead of the G7 summit in Cornwall, which Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison had been invited to attend as a guest. People briefed on the internal discussions said that Liz Truss, the International Trade Secretary, regarded the issue as a crunch point. One government official said that Liz has urged Liz agrees that if you can't get a good trade deal with Australia, then who can you get one with? But she is meeting stiff opposition from George Eustice, the Environmental Secretary, and Michael Gove, the Cabinet Minister, who have warned of the political fallout from a zero-tariff deal, the two insiders have said. Both camps admit that they have no idea which way Boris will jump on the issue. It's the £1 million question, said one of the government official, and Downing Street has declined to comment. One person with knowledge of the discussion said that there is an absolutely furious row going on in Whitehall over the Australian deal, with real pressure to get it resolved by the end of this week. Grove and Eustace are on one side, and Truss and Lord David and Frost are on the other. The UK officials said Australia and New Zealand negotiators were holding firm on the demands for full tariff liberalisation, which Truss was under pressure to grant in order to meet the G7 deadline, perhaps even phrased in over a 10-year period. But such a deal risks inflaming arguments over Scottish and Welsh independence, because the likely impact of zero import tariffs of Australian lamb and beef will hit hardest rural areas as Scotland and Welsh hill farmers. Gove, a former UK environmental minister, when in office, pledged that UK farmers would be protected by tariffs in the event of a no-deal Brexit, and it is a sensitive question raised by Brexit over the future of the UK. One ally of Gove said, "Everyone is supporting Liz to get a great deal." The government estimates that a free trade agreement with Australia would be worth an additional, wait for it, 0.1% to 0.02%. So less than 1%. I want to go over that again. 0.01% to 0.02% GDP over 15 years. It's worth nothing. Absolutely nothing. And we lose far, far more than we actually gain. Or, to put it in actual numbers, £2 million to £5 million more than the 2018 levels. Basically, we're talking about signing off on the slow death of British farming so that Liz Truss can score quick political points, said one insider opposed to the deal. That sums it up perfectly. Absolutely perfectly. Talking about the slow signing off on the slow death of British farming so that Liz Truss can score quick political points. I think that sums it up. Truss is adamant that Britain should trade with Australia on similar zero tariff, zero quota terms to the deal the UK struck with the EU. She also argues that a deal would be a sign of support for Australia, which is locked in a trade row with China and could expedite Britain's push to join the broader Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership. The internal Whitehall dispute was played out last week in 2 Sunday newspaper articles setting out the arguments for both sides. Martine Bates, the president of the National Farmers Union, warned that British farmers could never compete if Australian farmers, with their massive feedlots and soulless ranchers, were granted zero access tariff to the UK, even if phased in over time. The government says it wants to level up Britain, but this can never be achieved by throwing our family farms under the bus. Ooh. This is going to hurt the Conservatives massively. If this trade deal gets signed, this will be a massive blow to the Conservatives, because they will lose out on those farming votes. And as we've said before, once you sign a trade deal, once you sign up to that trade deal, it is impossible to get out of. The idea that you can renegotiate it is fanciful at best, unless you just want to pull the entire thing. Again, these areas that supported Brexit, and especially with farming in mind, it's not going to be good. And as I've said before, do you think this government is going to be interested in any UK business, nope, they're all interested in trying to prove that Brexit is a success, and hence why this deal is probably going to end up being signed, and it is going to be a massive, massive death blow to the British farming industry. At the same time, Lord Daniel Hannan, what a surprise, a pro-Brexit Conservative peer who was appointed last September to the UK Board of Trade as an advisor alongside former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott, argued viciously for the deal. Hannan accused the National Farmers Union officials and the DEFRA blob and a handful of Tory backwoodsmen of trying to preserve the status quo and failing to embrace the free trade opportunities of Brexit, which introduced exports to Asia, where meat prices are higher than in Europe. Yes, because it takes so many times. Again, just because it has a higher price does not mean you get to sell it at a higher price, because you then have to send it halfway around the world. This is not an opportunity. Unless you are a massive, massive multi-international company, you aren't going to be taking chances in this market. Again, Daniel Hannan, the brain of Brexit. Anyway, he said, if we can't do a proper trade deal, even with our kinsmen now down under, we might as well throw in the towel, he wrote in the Sunday Telegraph. Sam Lowe, the trade specialist at the Centre for European Reform think tank, says that the National Union for Farmers fears about the effects of Australian deal were overstated, given that export volumes were currently quite small. But the deal would set import precedents for future negotiations with both the US and the Monsieur bloc in Latin American countries, which includes Brazil, a very big beef importer. And what have I also been telling you about other countries forming their own blocs? That's the Latin American bloc. How well do you think they're going to be treated by us? And like I say, he's right. That sets out a very uncomfortable precedent if you're going to offer this. But again, this is all about, again, as we've said multiple times, our current government is run by free trade fanatics. They don't care, because as far as they're concerned, if British farms fail, then so be it, because to them the market is all. Anyway, it goes on to say, if these deals with Australia and New Zealand don't get done because of domestic opposition, that is pretty much says that the UK is not doing anything with global Britain. Because if we can't get these, well, in truth, everyone gets more difficult from here, he added. Eustace has argued that some Australian farm production methods do not meet UK standards. In the Queen's speech earlier this month, the government pledged to promote highest of animal welfare standards. The Department for International Trade said it would not comment on the speculation, but added that any deal signed with Australia would include protections for the agricultural industry, which will not undercut UK farmers or compromise our high standards. Then why are we talking about zero tariff access? That is ultimately going to hurt our farmers. And I just want to go back to the two, I think, most damaging quotes of this. The first of all, by the quote from the National Union of Farmers that basically said this, that to level up Britain, this can never be achieved by throwing our family farms under the bus. Powerful, powerful stuff. The next one, where is it? Here we are. So, because of how, again, we've stated how low this trade deal would be worth to us before, of 0.01%. That's nothing. Absolutely nothing. So, again, to read off that quote, basically we're talking about signing off on the slow death of British farming so that Liz Truss can score some quick political points. This is not going to be good at all. But again, apparently, this is what, people voted for. I'm told when we voted for Brexit to essentially destroy our own agricultural industry, which is worth quite a substantial amount. It's certainly worth more than fishing. I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but again, to get rid of all those jobs and that industry is going to be hugely damaging. Hugely damaging. And again, Brexiteers, I'm often told, we want to, do more things in Britain. Well, if you want to do more things in Britain, that means you have to have tariffs to protect internal industries. But of course, that means that this will mean that you can't get these fabulous trade deals around the world. And as I've said right at the very beginning, the two big ideas, as we've seen here, George Eustace versus Liz Truss. George Eustace probably on the side of levelling up, while Liz Truss is on the global Britain bandwagon. A massive rift in the Conservative Party is going to form again. So, as always, thank you for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share and subscribe button down below. And of course, we'll see you all next time.